You can. This show is so scripted, it's scripted. Read line 3, verse 5.
Okay, let me see. Let me read it. It's according to this. Nipples, nipples,
You can't say that on here.
cat usi. Like this one right here next to me.
That was just so weird. I You were so lame. I get I'm a jabberjaws and people don't like me because of who I am and my big mouth, like sunshine. But
Well,
you, you,
that's why I love Heidi because of her big mouth.
yeah.
No, but again, guys, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate you guys for being with us today. It's a beautiful day in the sunny Philippines. We did finally get a rain shower. Actually, it's kind of nice to have a little rain shower. Yeah, last night. But again,
24 degrees Celsius.
yes, to show sign of support. Again, get your partner's shoes, unlace them, and replace the shoelaces with al dente pasta.
Wow, wow. You spent days thinking about that one, or
What? It's snack on the go. Just saying.
could have said Twizzler or something.
It won't fit. Oh, wait, you're
If
right.
you unravel it,
Never mind, never mind. I'm gonna backtrack on that. Yeah, well, I mean, it's
you
up
can
to
just use
you. I
snakes.
mean, don't get me wrong.
Replace it with
No, no, no,
snakes,
no.
little garden
Remember,
snakes.
there's Twizzler string and there's Twizzlers.
Go on, do that again. Is tipping rude or expected, or if you don't tip, is it rude? Is it overdone here in this culture? We did a topic about this months ago, maybe even a year ago. Time flies when you're retired. And it's been covered a few times, of course. We want to cover maybe a different aspect. We want to hear from you about tipping. And
There's tipping and there's over tipping,
well, and then there's some that don't do it at all.
and there's
So
some that don't
commonly,
tip at
culturally,
all.
they don't.
Correct. And
So
again,
it's
comment your own opinion.
because this is a split. So the comments we had before and emails we've had, we've kind of gathered these together. And then I have a bunch of other comments that we have where people are pretty much split on that. So it's kind of like if you're an expat with money, you're going to hear people say, "Hey, I'm going to tip because maybe God's watching and I've got the money. So why not do it?" We're going to discuss the over tipping in other cultures like the US and Canada, or how they're now naturally adding that. Now, it's naturally added here in the Philippines at some Western restaurants, and some higher class restaurants will put like a service fee in there. But in general, I don't know how many times I've heard where the expat will leave 500 pesos on the table, and then their Filipino husband or wife or girlfriend or others will snatch it off the table. It's just where it is because people aren't sure whether to tip, not to tip. Is it right? And for me personally, I tip higher when there's better service, as there should be. There's been times George has been here and said, "Nope, there goes the tip," because some of it is ridiculous. Like the first experience that I had when I got here 3 years ago, we were at a restaurant. I really would not want to mention the restaurant, but it's a really nice restaurant. Like we couldn't get anybody to come to the table. It was like, nope, they wouldn't come over. And then finally, when they did, like three or four servers just stood there by the counter. And I'm like, George, are they afraid of me? Is their English not good enough? Are they nervous? And then when they came over, it's like, I don't know, it was just bad. They didn't come back for any refills. They didn't come back to check anything. And so service, that's another part of this topic today, is service in the Philippines. Can you get serviced in the Philippines? A chosen one?
Yeah,
Can you?
yeah.
But today.
Just a real quick trip down memory lane. Just so
Oh
you guys
boy.
know, the origin of the tip actually comes from, as Heidi, ironically, Heidi kind of actually mentioned it and reminded me of it.
The
Um,
Flintstones?
the origin of the tip was in actually
Is it Fred Flintstone going yabba dabba doo?
allegedly, okay, was
Dabba
in
dabba
England,
do?
and the reason being is
Oh yeah.
because
How far back?
remember ye old tavern here where we ordered me Yale, okay? They put coins into the empty pitcher, the ale pitcher. They
Hmm.
throw in their coins in the ale pitcher and shake it. Go,
Huh.
and the barmaid, she's like, "Here's the money." It's like, "Oh,
Oh,
they
okay.
need ale," and therefore she takes care of them. Hence the origin of the tip. You actually reminded me of it. You mentioned English and tips and everything
I'm in
else.
shock.
Yes, no, really, that's the origin of the tip. Now, speaking of
I thought it was Fred
splits,
Flintstone.
I'm gonna give you my own opinion on this one on tipping. Um, regarding splits and everything else, I always give my tip.
That's about all you have is a tip. So, and say, okay. In saying that, it's just an extreme here. Like some cultures, when they get here, won't tip at all. Um, I've heard about everything. I've read everything. Seen everything, and it just depends. But the one thing that I don't feel that's right is where it's expected, no matter what the service is here, and
Keyword
especially beings were
expected.
expat expected,
Expected.
and then you're going to get the other percentage is going to say, well, you should tip. You're an expat. It's usually from
But
another
we'll give
rude
you our
expat.
own opinions and
And the ones that we have,
experiences too, as well.
right. And typically, and people are going to disagree with me, Filipinos just don't
Specifically in
tip.
the Philippines, actually, yes. We're not talking about me, the US, or any other country. We're
Right.
talking
And
specifically in the
where it
Philippines.
has gotten out of
Yeah.
hand.
Mark Goldberg. Hello, beautiful people in the US. I only tip at a sit down restaurant or for a food delivery has gotten out of hand. Yes, unfortunately,
It
yes.
has, and that's what kind of sparked us to do this, is because we've been seeing it here lately in the US, that it's really out of hand, and I've probably seen 4 or 5, articles where the amount of deliveries are skyrocketing, and then people are giving at least 10 or 15%, and then people complain, and what sparked me is, I'm sure you guys actually heard it, there was a woman that gave like a $15 tip on top of a $15 meal. And it was really a generous tip. And the woman texted her and called her from the delivery, from the actual woman that was delivering. I can't tell you what company it was that it might have been just Uber
And it's
Eats or
not
one of
it's
those.
not the only incident.
No, and it's not the only, but I was really outraged too, and so was the world, because they've gotten so brazen. We're talking about, I think we seen last year, there was the other one over the pizza. The guy came back and attacked the woman at the door, literally called her a cheapskate and everything for a $5 tip or something. And I'm like, dude, so it's gotten so much so that I heard that at the bookstores they were adding tips into selling books to a cashier that was doing his job. They were automatically doing an automated tip into purchasing at a bookstore. That blew my mind.
What bookstore is that?
I would rather not say. But anyways,
I would
so
definitely stop. Well, there's only one
well,
left that
there
does that service would be Barnes and Noble.
it could have been in private. I'm not going to say which one,
Right.
but so it's happening. I'm saying the tipping culture in the US has got ridiculous. And I'm going to tell you right now, most of the foreigners aren't. They're going to skip over that all the way. Why would you tip a cashier? And a lot of them are where they're just walking up. As I'm to understand, do they have those in McDonald's now or some of those other fast food? As I'm to understand, there are just cashiers that are there, and people are standing there placing their own freaking orders,
Yeah, and it
and they're
says, "Would you like
still
to
putting
add gratuity?"
right.
Yes.
And it got out of hand before we even
Well,
left.
that's
And
that's been
it's
going
starting
on
to
before
get,
we left. Yeah.
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 So it was going on, and now you're going to get here to fancy resorts and everything, and you're going to get into places where it's going to be automated. I mean, it's just going to be expected because it's a higher type of 5-star service, or the places that are fancier. You're going to get that anywhere in the world where it's just going to be natural. People are going to be waiting. So the fancier of a place you go to, they might, but I'm just too old fashioned to know that if the service is just
Oh,
so bad that
like
we're
our
not going
Jollibee
to do.
robot. We should have tipped our Jollibee robot.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a tip.
Mhm. Well, here's the thing. There's a difference between the
And
US
you
and
ain't got
here.
no, well,
There,
they
no,
do it,
there
expats in
is.
front of expats will do it.
And what I'm saying is,
It won't be
it's
Filipino in front of Filipino.
okay. Well, I'm speaking from experience again because
You were a huge tipper in the United States, and I thought it was
key.
astronomical.
Well, okay. For those of you who are not aware, believe it or not, there's a lot of people who are not aware that, well, in my era, when you're a server, you get paid $3.15 an hour
Yeah,
when
there's
everybody else was getting paid at least $7 an hour
right, that's normal for
in the US.
right.
Here, they get paid no matter the same. They get paid. They all get paid the same.
Yeah.
They don't get paid the differential $3.15 and then they get double. They have a regular job. No, I'm well double as in $6 or $7, whatever. But
Mhm.
in the US, I know they only make $3 an hour, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't tip in the US. I know that for a fact.
No, I know that goes
So
on.
yes, I tip
Well,
big.
he just said his friends and the servers will hate you or
Right,
your
that's what I
family,
said.
but I'm
If
saying
family and
I
friends are
know
servers, then yeah, of course.
well,
I
no,
did say that earlier.
right, but there are people that are afraid people are watching them. They do it just because of peer pressure situations too.
right. But okay, the thing is, this is actually getting into the subject, like literally, because first off, when you get here, by default, I said default. Now, are there some establishment that follow the U.S. rule? I haven't dug deep into it, but everybody I've talked to, they get paid the same. Like they get paid your average, depending on establishment, from 500 pesos a day to some
It was
claim
even less than that at some
well,
of the
that's what
other
I said.
restaurants.
Some claim 800 pesos a day. I said claim. But what I'm saying is they get paid the same as the next person next to them that works in the kitchen. So here, tipping is not as a necessity. And what I'm saying is in the
And
US,
they're
like I
not used
said,
to it either.
yeah, like waitresses bust their humps and cooks bust their humps too, but the waiters get paid half unless you tip them. And that's why I tip waiters to compensate for their pay. And that's important to note that in the US that's how it works. I'm not sure how it is in other countries, but I know in the US that's how it works. Here, everybody I've spoken to, they get compensated really well without the tips. But well,
For their
they
what they're
get
used to.
compensated equally. How about that? All
And
right.
Filipinos are going to be appreciative. And we're not like super cheap. Like we tip our drivers, okay, and um we still tip the delivery guy, which isn't normal, but that's because we do a lot of supplement ordering online. So we tend to get like food items, pet items, things that are cheaper online because they got like grocery deliveries online. The grocery delivery guys we tip. But like if we go into a restaurant, we've been known to give a couple hundred pesos if we sit down for like 2 hours and we're doing different things, we will, and we tell them, to split it with the staff, or we just give it directly to the waitress or whatever. But you'll hear some people say, "Oh, that's way too cheap," and then it's way too much. And most of Filipinos getting up from the cafes and stuff, they don't go give a tip or anything. It's not a norm. Like I said, only if you go into, say, like we mentioned, Denny's and the Western style restaurants, will actually expect it. And then you have the ones where um, they just don't tip at all.
Well, one of
But
them.
we're kind of in between. That's what I was trying to remember what I
Well,
wanted to make point. We're in between because there are people that tip way too much. You'll see them drop 1,000 pesos, 500 pesos, and then you'll see the extreme where they just won't do it at all. So we're like somewhere in the middle. But there are the ones that are coming here that are just, I hate to say it, it's just ruining it for everybody when they drop 500, 600
no,
pesos on a
and
$10 meal, and it's like, it's kind of like, okay, like I said earlier, maybe, I
key.
don't know, yeah,
Well,
why
yeah.
they would do it.
Keyword again is ruining it for everybody else, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but you have to think beyond yourself. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is, for example, personally, what we experienced, me and Heidi. Okay. Now, when we landed here, okay, we landed during the C-19 era, and we got quarantined, and then we had to go to our location, our rental, but it was just a street block away from where we used to live. Because remember, tipping goes beyond servers. So me and Heidi had to get a vehicle to get us from that location to our rental. Now it's only a street block away, but one, again, it's that era. You're really not supposed to be out. Two, we had luggages. So we needed a vehicle. So we hired a driver. Okay. Now the driver ferried us literally, again, a street block away. Street block, not city block. But babe, again, babe, city street block is literally from your eyesight right there. It's right there. It's not that far. But when we tipped him well. I mean, well, really well. I can't. I feel
And the service was overcharged because it was the
right.
city,
First off,
the
the service was
I mean,
overcharged, right, and then we tipped him,
because now it's
and
half the
it's
price.
not it's not even 500 pesos. It's over that. You know what I'm
We
saying?
didn't even go a mile
Right.
from
Well, that's
the
what I
where
said.
we
It's a
were
street
picked up.
block, like a street block, literally a street. And but when we gave him the money, he looked at us like we robbed his kid. That's my point.
You'll get
By
some that'll be appreciative.
ruining it for others, that means another expat had ruined that guy for
Oh, that's
us.
right. That's when we moved from the one
Correct.
house to the other one. He didn't
Because
even help us put the luggage in or nothing. He just sat in his car on the phone.
right, he
And
sulked. He looked
so
at us like, "You cheapskate." No, dude, you.
And then that was the same
That's what I'm
guy
saying.
that
It's walking distance.
during the ride, we asked him about his phone number because some will do private rides afterwards. And then when we called him back, he must have remembered with me being an expat because remember it was 3 times higher than the average person. And so I was just like, well, then fine. I guess he didn't actually want the work. California Bear, he's talking about calendarias because we're just going to get right into the topic and then we'll go through and answer other people. Um,
California Bear, Carinderia street vendors give the change. Restaurants, depending on service, 20 to 50 pesos if extremely good, 100 plus or 10% of well-established restaurants.
We try to go by 20% of the bill if it's actually decent, or like some of the places like Eggs and Breaky is walk up. You actually get your own food. You know, there's tables where you go and sit down, but like you walk up, you place your order, but they do have a chip tip jar up there. There's a cashier and cooks back there. We tend to drop something in there anyways because sometimes they'll bring us our food out. And then of course we know they're cleaning up, but we go there all the time. So like we're kind of established with them. But I do have some comments here on tipping in general. I think there just should be somewhere in between. I mean, it's not going to be like the US where you're expected to tip on every single thing,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
and yeah, no, you can go
No,
ahead
I have
read.
several comments to go through,
But
so you
there's a
might as
lot of
well.
things that most of expats are not aware that how it works here in the Philippines. For example, again, there is no pay difference here in the Philippines, first off, and then there's more to that. But real quick,
More pay difference. You got to
no, no,
explain
no,
that. I mean, you explain other
that's
things,
not what
but
I
you
said, babe. I said there is no pay difference. That's what I said. But there's more to that. There's more.
what
That
I'm missing something. Pay difference.
like in the U.S., a server gets paid $3. Back then, in my era, $3
No, that
15,
you're
and then
talking about
everybody
like
else.
the you're talking about like the waitress wages where they're
Right.
paying two
No,
dollars and
here they're
50.
pretty much
No,
equal.
they
Right,
they
right,
all get that, and I don't think that matters. I don't care if they're making $3,000 a
right,
day. If they're not doing the proper service, I'm not going to do it.
right.
You'll have some that say, "Well, you should do it anyways," and then honestly, there's a big percentage that won't tip at all is expats, even at nice places with good service. They just feel that they don't have to, and they do come from a tipping culture. I get it. So, you know, they're already living in a country where the rents are inexpensive. There's like a really strange balance, hence why we're actually covering this.
Right. And actually, Kate Dallas made a very perfect point. That's very important that a lot of people forget. I tip, in my opinion, customer service in the Philippines is bad.
Mhm.
This is very important to note. Now, actually,
It
I'm going to
is.
ask Heidi
Oh boy, here we go.
because this, I'm not talking about as in a Filipino point of view at this point. Because remember, you guys are expats. Odds are you'll be in an expat point of view. What do you think of the customer service here in the Philippines? Honestly,
Well, we had a whole video on service in the Philippines, and in general, customer service is bad here. Store service can be bad. Unless they're really wanting you to buy something, then you're just outright hounded, which is even weirder. I won't even go into certain department stores in the mall because literally there's 5 women standing there, or like right on top of you, like a makeup counter at the Mac store or something. I mean, it's like, and I'm like, dude, I'm just looking for some sheets, man. So it's like they're pushy to do their sales. They even had some of them at a mall in Watson's. Remember, there were them 3, 4 women trying to push products throughout a small Watson store in the mall. Like they were dressed up like they were working at Mac counter or something, and it was kind of wild. But in general, customer service through the phones, custom or service can be really poor here in the Philippines. We've been to several restaurants where they just don't want to do anything, and I get it. Wages will be a big factor on pushing people for that. It shouldn't be, but they're saying, like I said, that's the silent quitting thing that I was talking about
well,
earlier.
now actually, just real quick again before because this is important, very important. One, I would never tip anybody who doesn't treat me well. Okay, this is coming from a guy who actually, according to Heidi, I over tip.
Well, we have been known to tip
Right,
everybody.
but what I'm saying is again,
We've had a few real quick. We had a few delivery drivers that were
no,
really
there's some
nasty
really good
and a
ones,
bunch of
and
missing
there are
items,
some
which
that
is
have
not
gone
always.
out of their way. Like for instance, we had a guy which our fries spilled in his grab bag, and guess what? He drove back,
And we said we were
he
okay
ordered
with it. This was a
fries,
couple
and he
months
came
ago.
back and got us new fries, and he didn't have to do that. It's not part of his job, but he did. But he got a bigger tip because of that. But okay, here's the thing, and a lot again. One, in I have to ingrain this for most of you because a lot of people don't think past the person in front of them. What I mean by that is, if you get a bad waiter in the US, is it because all Americans are bad? No, it's because that person is not a very good is not a very good waiter.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not the Filipino
Right.
culture, it's the
It's not the
individual.
culture. However, be aware that these jobs are readily available for whoever who walks into that front door looking for a job.
Same in any
What
country,
I'm
I don't
saying
feel
is
it's any different.
the higher grade Filipinos.
There's a big overturn here, is that
Right.
what you're trying to
No, well, no. What I'm saying is the higher grade Filipinos, they do go through these waiting jobs. Same thing in the US. You get
Mhm.
you get super waiters in the US. And but then I ask, where are you studying? And they said, "Oh, actually I'm almost I'm gonna graduate my college degree. I'm gonna get it next month."
Okay,
What I'm saying is usually the best waiters I've ever had in the US, they have a college education, they're almost ready to graduate.
I disagree.
No, no, I know
I
that.
disagree.
No, I
It's
know that.
experience, how they were raised, how they were trained, and all the above
Right,
matter.
but what I'm
Just
saying
because
is
there's some college student
but
doesn't
no. I'm not
mean
saying
that I
they
don't even
all
know why you would
are
go all
like
the way
that, but what
through
I'm saying
that. So I disagree.
is upbringing and yeah, it's still a caliber. It's a type of caliber. What I'm saying is
I think it's the individual person here more so. The I think it just depends on what country and it depends on what country the people are from. Like there are certain Asian countries that arrive here that doesn't matter unless it's forced into the bill. They're not tipping anybody for any reason. We don't care how much work they
well,
do.
where I'm getting at is
Because this year I said I'm clamping down on the tipping.
no, this is what I'm getting at. And I understand what this is, babe, this is part of the topic.
Yeah, it's fine to me.
Yeah, but okay. Now what I'm getting at again is as K Dot says, there's bad service here. And I'm not gonna argue there is bad service. But odds are these bad servers, if they're male, just an example, or female actually, it doesn't matter. The ones that provide bad service, male or female, are the ones that pee behind that wall.
Once again, I disagree.
No. I know that.
I disagree.
No, no.
Because I really think it's most. I'd almost put service here in the
Right, but
Philippines at
then
90%.
that's
It
the
doesn't mean they're pissing on the wall.
no.
So
That's the meat grinder theory, which means they're getting whoever gets in, and then they work them.
I've seen it all the way up to fancy resorts to the Western restaurants down
Yeah, and they
to
probably do that same, babe. There's
all
there.
these mom and pop
Well,
shops up and down MacArthur. It just it
okay.
depends
Now
on
I'm
multiple
speaking as a
factors.
Filipino, guys. Again, be aware. I'm speaking as a Filipino. A lot of Filipinos that I've met in the US. I can tell right away if they were born and raised in the US and they were born and raised down in the Philippines just by how they talk and walk and everything.
Yeah, most
And honestly, well, I really don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but point being is there is a distinction of high grade and low grade Filipinos, no different as
I
Americans, there's high grade and low grade
well no,
Americans.
I get that. So
I'm
and
speaking
right. That I actually get. So
right.
really it's been since the beginning of time in the Philippines that it's just not a tipping culture. And they say when in Rome and all that. So we're going to still tip, but because of the service we've gotten in the last 6 months to a year, I told George we are not tipping every single person. Like we tend to do give like if something was 40 pesos outside that was being purchased from one of those ride by on a bike vendors, we were just giving them 100 and just let them go. So they were getting double the money because we just and having changes here. You're going to get a lot of the servers or people selling things. Oh, I don't have change for that. That's like the first thing that a cab driver will say. Or we had that on a food delivery last month where it was like a 500-600 peso difference, and I'm like, yeah, dude, you're not getting a 600 peso tip. I was like, to most people, like, oh, well, that's only like $8-9. Why didn't you just let them have it? And it's like, because that's probably what they're making a day. And some people are like, well, maybe they need it and all that. No. So I ran in the house and had to scrounge up the exact change to avoid that. But we in the past year have tipped on everything. Bad service. We've tipped on everything from every package delivery, no matter what company it came from. We delivered, of course, it'd be normal on a billig buying boxes being delivered because they bring them in, but most of them here lately aren't even bringing them in the house. We had one of the 3 or 4 we had last year where they actually brought it in for us. And so on everything, the Calendaria people, if we bought like when we were down on Walking Street and we bought some items from one of the guys, Same thing. When we bought the umbrella, we just let them keep the money. So everything we just relinquished any remaining money. But I think that only certain services, I told George this year, will we actually do it because we're losing, and we're literally losing because we're not even getting good service. We were just giving money to every single person. If we bought something from the popcorn people that were inside the mall, we'd let them keep. Everything was leaving remaining money, but change does play into a factor because most will say don't have the change, and some need the exact change. Because if you try to hand off 1,000 pesos or 500 and the item is 350 or 400, most of them say I don't have the change, and it could be real, and some of it could actually be a semi scam. You don't disagree that some are doing it?
It depends on the situation for the most part.
It's a known situation
Well,
that
here's
most will
here's
say
now
that,
this is
especially the drivers and
this
the
is
truck
that's
drivers.
what I'm getting at. The drivers is I can't argue with.
Just something to look out for. Half
Well,
change if you're not going to tip.
the drivers, no, I really don't expect them to have always have the change. No, but culturally, it's like Mexico. If you go to a store and they don't have change, culturally, they will go to the next store over and ask for some
They should be
change
willing
for
to
you.
do that. If they go out of their way,
Right.
we've been known to tip afterwards. But if
Now,
they just say no and we have to already give up the money,
correct. Areas like prof- once it turns professional, for example, Watson's, then yes, they can say no, we don't have change because again, they're not allowed to break change because of security reasons. It's not it. Just be aware. It depends on the environment, and then that's something you have to learn.
yeah, that further down, and I'll address this, and I'm going to go through the comments that we had on our other videos and throughout the year. It says here when you're on vacation, it's different. What's your opinion on that? I disagree.
I disagree because it still ruins it for everybody.
And speaking of ruining it for everybody, I still believe. I've heard this on and off too about saying that when people show up in other countries, like somebody said, now there's a flood of vloggers and people in all these different countries. It's caused the prices to go up. It's caused rents to go up because they're all leaving the U.S. and other countries because it's way too expensive to live in those countries. Therefore, when they come to now smaller areas in Mexico, here in the Philippines, and other countries, it's causing prices to go up for the locals. But I think that's been like that since the beginning of time.
Correct. Now, I was gonna get to that, and Heidi mentioned it. When I say run it for everybody, I don't mean it as an opinion. I don't mean it as in, what do you mean ruin it for everybody? Because no, realistically, in reality, if let's say if I tip the same restaurant, okay, I tip 20 pesos after every meal. Doesn't matter if Heidi tips the person 500 pesos. It shouldn't affect me, right? Because honestly, that's up to that person. But the problem is that's not how it works. It's not about, well, what do you mean it ruins it for everybody? That's up to that waiter. No. The problem is it's a rule of economics. It's when the rule of supply and demand, meaning since the supply of the expats is higher than a local, it raises the prices because
Yeah, no, they raise the
it
price of
raises
the items.
expectations. Correct. Again, I'm not being selfish here when I say it
Well,
ruins it for no, I
there's
don't mean it
and
that way.
you're gonna have others that disagree that it's inflation too. We understand
Well,
normal inflation, but
but
but okay, when the
but
country reopened, it's been back officially way open for over a year and a half. And during that time, I've watched a $10,000 rental in Dumaguete turn into 30,000.
well,
Tell me inflation went up that much. And now people are coming in here because you can't do commercial property. You have to have all the legit stuff for it. And I'm not even gonna go into that. But those that are coming in and buying commercial realty like they were doing, or actual rentals, and they're doing the Airbnbs and all that, things are substantially going up in this country. So to me and a lot of Filipinos, it's just not the costs are going up here. And but
right.
yeah.
It's again, it's not as cut and dry as most people see with their eyes. And what I mean by that is, for example, inflation. It's not really inflation. Is for example, when you get a Grab, okay, which is a cab, there's more Grab drivers right here, right by Clark. There's more Grab drivers. Economically, it should be cheaper because they're a higher supply. But guess what? It costs more here because of the expectation. It's just one of those things that you can't
Hmm.
avoid.
All right. So I'm just going to go through some of the comments I had. Like I said, you're going to hear a vast array. Um, somebody said, and this is not going to quite be dealing with the Philippines, but tipping throughout the world. In Panama back in '09, and he went way back. Nobody tipped. Fast forward to now, the arrival of tens of thousands of American retirees. Tips are automatically being put on the bill in a lot of places. Also, inflation on everything has taken off since the expats are coming in, and they're also overpaying for everything. The prices are going up. Same here now in this day and age. So just be careful in tipping and overpaying. Again, these comments came off of some of our old videos and from emails, and I've gathered a bunch of them together. And that kind of makes sense. We've been saying that. So we mentioned that the prices of rent and other services are going up. And there was a straight out other vlogger that said, that's not so. We're not the ones raising the prices. It's just the Philippines. And I disagree on that. Here's somebody all on their own on a tipping video that actually would make that comment. And it's just kind of off to hear someone say that we are not responsible for the Filipinos paying more or other expats. It's the ones that are coming through that are asking, "Hey, I'm looking for 100,000 peso a month place," which they are, 2,000. They got them all over Pampanga and Manila and other parts of the Philippines where there are some really outrageous size houses at 3,000, 4,000 US dollars a month. Well, yeah, if you've got 15,000 a month worth of retirement between you and your spouse, and you have like, all these pensions coming in and investments, yeah, some people can afford that. But it's those that are coming in that same house that's oversized just a few years back would have been half that cost. But since the pandemic and the cost going up in other countries, people are really flooding in this country to actually get cheaper prices. So when people are coming in and paying more on the tips. There was like this guy. I still tell the story because it blew my mind. The guy had his groceries taken out to the car. Okay, they may not even attempt that with, and this was out of the SM store. They wouldn't even attempt that with a Filipino. The Filipino would just be taking their own groceries out to there. But it was an older white expat man. I just got to put it that they knew that he was foreign. And when they took that time to do something that they typically do in the US, the guy gave him more than his salary for just putting the bags in the back.
Days pay, yeah.
So they gave him 500 pesos. Okay, 500. That guy does not make 500 a day. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, you should give it because he's broke and because I feel sorry for him and God could be watching and I don't want to be judged by other expats that are in the parking lot. But whatever reason he decided to do it, and the guy had lived here long term. So it's not like he was just visiting or anything else. But that overpaying like that, and I call it really overpaying, is not good because he's going to be looking at me the next time I come in SM, and they're even going to be pushing to do stuff. There are some really pushy people here in the Philippines too, and I get their hustle. I can appreciate a hustle as much as the next guy. Cat's got me all tearing up today. Um, move on to the next one. Like I said, we'll get to your comments here in a minute, guys, and I will be doing a recap of this as normal. A tip helps these people. These are going to be different opinions. Try living on $8 a day in some cases. We tip small amounts, which helps all of them. Which you're not going to be their savior, by the way. I bet we went through a couple thousand pesos a month just the last few months in giving out tips. I used to think the same thing when I got here. It's like when we were in the hotel during the lockdown when we first entered the country, we were in separate rooms. So George is over there giving tips and I'm giving tips. If they'd have let us in the same room at that time, they didn't have where they were allowing families to stay together. So we were in two separate rooms during that, which was insane. And I was tipping and he was tipping, but we were tipping every time they came to the door. They were bringing us food that we paid for. It was like 40,000 for the was it 10 days they had us in there or 8, and then it was 2 out. Whatever it was, we were in there. It was like over 40,000 pesos for being in there. The food was part of that. I was tipping the guys every time they showed up at the door. And then I joked about pizza. Now the kid did go out of his way and go get one of the Filipino pizzas, which I ended up giving to George because I'm not like used to the Filipino pizza. But he brought me a little pizza, and it's like I gave him the money for it, and I gave him a tip. But every time he came to the room, which was really nice of him, after he did that, he came every time to do things.
That was a brand name pizza.
It was, yeah, it was. I don't like
That's
Filipino
not
pizza.
that's not your typical. Let me run to the corner. No, that's a restaurant.
Yeah, no, that was, yeah, it was. I don't like the sauce that they put on there and the type of breading it was. But either way, we were tipping, he was tipping. So I just said we were going to actually cut out. But he says this person says they tip everybody for everything. If you don't want to tip, then that's up to you. Another person said, having so many problems and stress, a small tip will help the Filipinos out, and they'll be thankful for it. Another person said the average wage out in the province is 400 and under. So if that server is only making 200 a day in tips, then they'll be very happy. And then they were stating, are the employers really keeping the tips at these restaurants, whether it's a
Okay.
big or little?
So yeah, that's what I was getting at. Now first off, remember I said
Hey, Scott's
earlier,
in the house, babe.
a lot of people aren't aware of this. There's certain a lot of things that people aren't. Hey Scott, how you doing? Yeah, Scott had slept for 24 hours when he
He just
arrived in
got home.
Maryland, Baltimore. Yeah. Okay. Now by default, when I say default, I'm not saying all establishments are like this, but I'm saying by default, this is the Philippine default. Kind of like, remember I established earlier that Philippine default servers get paid as much as the cooks are on average. Okay, I'm not saying they all are, but by default, they usually get paid very comparable. They don't get paid like, again, like half of what cooks usually get paid for in the US. So by default, the servers already get paid somewhat comparable wages as the cooks, whatever, or bussers or whatever. Well, the bussers get paid a little lower, obviously. But by default, when you go to a Philippine restaurant, the tips are called what you guys call in the US as pulled tips. What that means is not just the servers, everybody during that shift
Mhm.
gets a slice of that tip. So for example, Angie, for example, gave you excellent service, and then you had a big table, right? And then Greg treated your friend Joey next to you.
Yeah,
It doesn't
it's
matter
really
if I give Angie 500, guess what?
that does happen a lot.
They'll still get that slice. It's all evenly added up. So be aware by
That even
default.
if you hand off that waitress
Yeah,
500 pesos, there she's just gonna go put it in a jar,
just goes in a jar and gets divvied up by default. That's how
which some
Philippine
people
tips
are okay with
are.
that.
No, some are, but a lot of people are not aware.
Right. Somebody else said, I'm sure the people there that's complaining about tipping in the Philippines are not really Filipino. They appreciate it. The people that complain are the people that complain about everything that are from the US. And so I love how they just place everything on America. And I love how people place everything on a American woman. I don't know how many comments I read from other channels that we watch on a regular basis, and the first thing they want to point out is that American woman. And I'm like, dude, we're all in that same boat. So it male, female, whatever, a complainer is a complainer is a complainer. Some will see, it's kind of like when some people see, one way, everybody sees what they want to see. And my complaints become somebody else's gold. There's some days I'm just gonna just complain about everything. Hey, I'm over 50 and I got a lot of issues going on. But they are hard, true facts. That is for sure. Um and I get it. I mean, it's those that are complaining, but it's the over tippers that, I don't know. It's just there's a lot of sides to it. Somebody says I definitely tip. The people here hardly even scrape by on 100 pesos a day in tips. And I get that. I always tell the people that I expect service. They also say they tip taxis. There are some people I've seen people in the US that do that where they flat out just you have to let them know what you're actually expecting. Not everybody's gonna sit down and say, I expect a drink every 10 minutes. Please make sure that I don't, my glass doesn't go empty and all that. But depending on where you're at, you go to a really smancy place in New York or certain parts of Florida, like in Miami and all that, and you go to a place where you're putting out $1,000 a night bill or something, you can pretty much tell them to do whatever you're actually expecting. In other words, keep the champagne coming, every time the bottle comes empty, be sure to give table five lady drinks all night, or lady drinks, or what I'm saying is like Cosmos or something. But you could specifically tell your waitress, whether it's a sit down restaurant like fancy food and all that, you could put out your specifics. And there still are. I've seen people that'll go into just a mom and pop restaurant and say, Make sure this isn't salty, make sure that I have two waters sitting here. You got to say what you want and everything, but
Well, you can set your expectations, but there are
that's the
standards.
word.
There
So,
are there are standards, and what I mean by that, can you set your expectations? Yes, but honestly, again, Scott was actually a restaurant manager for the longest time, and me and him had discussions about this. And I have experience in restaurant management, although I really hated it only because there's a lot of crap you have to deal with.
yeah.
But what I'm getting at is servers. Okay, sorry, servers. Any server who are watching me right now, there are certain expectations. You have to, one, again, check up on your client. Check make sure that their drinks are always full. Check that their plate, if it is empty, take it away, even if you're not the busboy. You know what I'm saying? Because actually, a busboy doesn't come in until after the table's cleared up. There are preset expectations. Now, if you don't do those basics, then you failed.
Well, and some will see it as a complaint, like, "Oh God, here comes Tom. He's so picky and he complains and he does this and that." Well, just because he has expectations and he leaves the person a tip, it doesn't mean that they're complaining or whatever. You're right. The word is expectation. Ruby, we're going to address your comment here because the next one wildly addresses the same
Right.
situation.
But before we move on, just real quick. No, no. There's one thing that you cannot expect here in the Philippines, exclusively in the Philippines.
A good-looking guy,
Soda.
a woman on time,
How do they serve soda here?
warm, in a bag,
No, not in a restaurant.
without a smile,
Okay,
in a can.
they serve it to you in a can.
Most of the time.
Right. What I'm saying is that's the only exception, that if you want a refill on your soda, you have to ask for it, because it's hard to tell because it's in a soda can. They can't tell if it's empty or not.
Well, but that's not all places.
Most
It's
places. That's the, again, defaults. I'm talking about defaults. I'm not saying all places. And that's
well,
defaults.
that was like I keep
I mean,
mentioning Denny's.
Candy Palace does
Well,
that. Put it
well,
that way.
it was like Denny's or something. We bought
And
individual
Denny's, yeah.
coffees, but it wasn't the refillable coffee, like literally on their menu. And I don't know if they changed that in the US, but there was a refillable coffee and just a coffee. And I'm like, there was a difference in that one.
Yeah.
So you had to actually ask for it. As an Aussie, I only tip for exceptional service. My wife is Filipina. Same. She looks after that, and I've never seen her give more than 100 pesos at any restaurant.
100 pesos is a lot
And what you talking about? Well,
for a
not
tip.
for right, but I'm going to say starting this year, we're going to start adhering to some of that because we've been known to give a couple hundred, two, three, 400 pesos when we go into these
Well, you
restaurants.
still
Yeah,
follow on your
you're trying to tip the entire
your
restaurant. You're the one giving
no, 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 no,
$50
no,
tips
no,
in the
no, no, no,
US.
no. You still have to follow the 10% rule or 25% rule, whatever.
Right, but we weren't following that. Some of our tips were astronomical last year. And we did run into that I don't have change situation. So it's just kind of a
I like to
this year
give
we're
my
being
tips.
you ain't giving nobody no tip. So if we are by ourselves in a full service restaurant and the bill is 500 pesos, then max he's giving 30 or 40 pesos on that. Nothing at all if the food is cold, bad, or we don't get service. So that's an expat in a Filipina, and he said she said the same thing. In areas of high levels of the expats, tipping has become more and more normal as far as them being over. And that came from somebody that was from Australia, which brings us into Rubies. You want to
Over here in Australia, tipping isn't part of the culture because workers get good wages. However, it's now starting to creep in hospitality service. Well,
in resort
and
areas
that's
and
what I
rich areas it
said,
is
by
here.
because workers get good wages. Again, that's why I said I don't know how it is in Australia, but again, in America, servers get a different pay rate
And
entirely.
when we and after we tipped every time someone came to his room and our room during the big C. When we left, we were handing the guys we really repaid every guy on the way out. Now the one guy grabbed my luggage and took it out and helped load it, but we were already tipping 100 pesos here, 200 pesos here. He came because my remote was not working for the TV and he put batteries in it and I gave him a couple hundred pesos for coming because he came so quick, but he knew that they are on to service. It's like any expensive hotel or wherever. He knew at that point, and believe me, they're going to lock in on that no matter where. And that's okay if you have it to give, but this year I'm really going to be on to the tipping thing because I just want to be more aware that you also don't want to set yourself up for multiple reasons and giving the heavier tips. Um, this next one is the one that I was addressing about a dual citizen that is Filipino and he's been here for over 30 years. Which he speaks Tagalog, which is actually it's going to matter. We always say, adapt to the culture, learn. I'm slowly learning myself. And this again is a comment. This isn't our own opinion. You haven't lived here long enough to really understand that this is a culture. While it may seem that they appreciate at the moment, and yes, they do, but seconds that you're unable to do it, for example, if you don't, then they will actually turn on you like a pack of wolves. Again, this isn't my opinion, and it says, advice that the guy wants to give is you should learn Tagalog, and get to know the actual situation because I guess they're saying that learning language will hear them talking about you or understand what they're saying.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I never let a lot of Hispanics know that I speak Spanish and understand Spanish, and I can hear them talk crap about me sometimes.
Yeah, it actually can happen on that.
Hmm.
So, um,
And I
I'll
do the
find.
same thing to Filipinos, just so you guys know, because a lot of times they think I don't speak Filipino or Tagalog or Kapampangan, and I just listen in and see what they're saying. Um, that's not rude. They just assume that I don't speak it. I mean, that's their fault. I'm like,
Another guy, okay, so this is on something totally different. Tipping after a meal does not seem to be part of the Philippine culture, is what this guy said. However, should I leave a small tip anyways? And this always comes into people's mind. They're kind of like, oh, I'm in a foreign country. I should just be nice. Or I should be. I'm still down to the point of if you're getting the good service and you feel so, you should do so. Just don't do it like astronomical. So the guy was like, "Well, how much should I be tipping?" Is 30 pesos, 20 pesos. And somebody came in and says, "I do so because I know the servers aren't getting paid a whole lot. So I tip 50 to 100 on a couple hundred peso meal." Well, think about what you would do in the US. Yeah, so if it's a 300 peso meal and you're giving 100 peso, that's still a little
that's
high.
really high.
But is it
But,
your conscience getting to
but
you? Are you trying to ball in front of somebody? Or, what is the reason you're doing it? Because usually on top of it, you're getting bad service. I'm sorry. That's
yeah,
going to
that's what I was
become
getting
the
at.
norm.
But I mean,
So is it because you feel
as
bad?
long as I treat you right, I
Because
mean,
if I paid out every time I felt bad about something, we would be homeless right now. Like, if I felt bad about every cat, we fed every cat or every kid on the street that looked hungry or went over to the Avacon Bridge area where there are just people that are really it's going to be your heart's going to go out to it's just going to break for months when you first get here. So you would go broke.
as a rule, you don't feel bad if you tip 10%. Don't feel bad if you tip 10%.
Um yes, this guy says he always tips even when he goes to Sam's Club, which I believe you walk up and they hand it to you. So he says he tips when he picks up and purchases a pizza. He gives the waitress 500 pesos on a pickup on a Sam's Pizza or whatever I guess I'm assuming that is
Well, as long as
the
they're nice to you, like I said, I mean,
that's SNR is what I think he's referring to because that's
yeah,
here in the Philippines. There is no
as long as they're
Sam's,
nice to you.
but I think they consider, but he likes to see her face light up. So that's another thing. I think people are it's kind of like when they give out the food to the kids. Some just probably gonna offend some people. They get their rocks off. What's the word that I'm looking for? He says he just likes to see her face light up. The others like to see it with the kids, and I just don't think it's at that level. I think it's some sort of
What
superiority,
self gratification?
that's the word. I said superiority. That would be when the guys are all in Dumagetti trying to show off in the bars and stuff. Or I
Makes
seen
them
something ridiculous the
feel
other
better
day.
about themselves, which is
Yeah,
again, there's nothing wrong with it. But
yeah. Um, So 20 pesos is an insult. They said the guy giving out 20 pesos. And you're going to hear other people say that, yeah, handing out 100 pesos is also an insult.
do it,
Don't be cheap.
do it for the right reasons, and